What does that mean to be too certain? Well, that means that there's an appropriate level of certainty. Okay. So, what's the appropriate level of certainty? Um, the appropriate level of certainty is, well, it's not arbitrary. That's for one thing. It's not just like a what is a feeling, but and you can choose to be certain. It's like a feeling, but it's also like a tone. You can express things with a higher degree of certainty, a lower degree of certainty, and that's like this outward certainty. And then there's inward certainty, which is like how certain you feel. Right? You can feel certain about something, and then there's kind of the reflective mental reflection of just like kind of internal reflection of um, how certain should I be? And so those are kind of the dimensions of certainty. And then what is it? Um, well, high certainty, the spectrum, and you can be kind of, I think it's like a 0 to 100% spectrum. So you can be highly certain, or you can have no certainty, I think. And it doesn't really negative certainty. I don't think I don't think that makes any sense. So high certainty is 100% certainty. That means that should mean is that you there's basically no chance you can be wrong, um, and that's not being feeling 100 certain. It doesn't mean there's no chance that you can be wrong, of course. But if you feel if you are expressing a high degree of certainty, or if you're feeling a high degree of certainty, it should correlate with the reality that there is you are right. You're objectively right, and that means there's no evidence. You couldn't be presented with evidence where you change your mind. Um, and no certainty is that just basically a guess. Um, so that means that there is, based on that definition, there is an appropriate amount of certainty you should feel because it should correlate with the amount of research you've done and the amount of thought you put into it, and also your general capacity to understand the topic you're talking about, or the topic that you have a belief about. So if you've haven't done any research, you haven't really thought about it, and you're not an expert in the area, or you just generally understand that this is kind of a high IQ topic, and maybe your IQ isn't at the level, um, kind of the gatekeeping level for the topic, you probably shouldn't have high certainty um, about anything, or at least not certain, not subjects where there's those prerequisites. You should never have 100% certainty. I mean, even experts don't have 100% certainty on areas that they're experts in, on kind of subjects or beliefs or ideas in the areas that they're experts in. Um, I guess that's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like the more you know, the kind of less certainty you experience. Oh, I think so. The Dunning-Kruger effect. I think the actual Dunning-Kruger effect is not actually about stupid people believing they're more intelligent, but it's more about your expertise in an area actually decreases your certainty because you realize how complex the area is. When you have less expertise, things seem simpler. And then as your expertise kind of expands and you learn more, you're like, oh wow, this is really complicated. I'm just kind of scratching the surface. And then so it's not actually about intelligence, it's about expertise. But then I think it's kind of you can use a similar concept or like similar phenomenon where people who are more intelligent present themselves as less intelligent and feel less intelligent because they're just aware of the sheer complexity of life in general. So, regardless of their level of expertise, they'll always feel dumber and they'll always have less certainty because they're more reflective. It's like there's a correct amount of certainty that you should have for things, and that means that like your brain it's like if you have experiencing low certainty when you actually don't know much, that's like a mental process. That's like your brain functioning properly. Like there is some sort of internal kind of oversight or like some sort of internal process that is self-aware and like running the numbers and accurately like communicating information between different areas of the brain. And that's like a trait of somebody who's intelligent. And it's a trait of a much simpler brain to just, it's like there is no, it's just everything's 100%. Like, that's not a process. That's not internal reflection. That's just being at 100% all the time. Um, and I think it makes sense that like if I don't know if your brain just doesn't perform as well, if it can't like it's like it's hard to kind of reflect all the time and on every single topic because there's it's not just like it's like you have to reflect on how much do I know about this, how much research have I done, like how complex is the area, is it how complex of an area is it, do I think like my own intelligence is like at the level, and it's like you have to do that in real time on every single thing, every single belief you have. That's not something that comes for free. And some people, because they can't do it, when people can't do that, you should just fall back to being modest and be like, but you should just feel uncertain all the time. But that's, people don't want to walk through life just like feeling like they don't know anything. Um, I mean, it doesn't feel good and people won't respect you. And it's kind of a cheat that you can just like be certain about things and then people just most unless you're actually talking about a real expert, most people will just kind of respect you more. You'll just kind of you'll get through. You'll kind of there's doorways that open just because you're more confident, more certain. It really doesn't matter if that certainty is grounded and if that certainty is justified. But yeah, I don't know. There is a correct level of certainty, and that you should have. And I think a lot of people have noticed that people are just way too certain about everything. It's like you don't you don't have to believe every thought you have. Um, you don't have to. What it like knowing something is not simply finding one explanation for why it could be and then deciding that's the correct explanation. I mean, there's always a thousand different ways you could look at something, and I think some people they think through some sort of complex subject and they find one explanation or one reason, where it's like they're trying to understand a person's behavior and then they find one explanation, and then they think, well, that the first it's like they find one explanation and then they're just like, okay, that's the explanation. I think, well, if you can find another equally valid explanation, it's like in order to know something, you have to rule out every other possibility. And if you haven't ruled out every other possibility, every other possible explanation, you don't really know it. And even if you do rule out every single explanation, so how do you know that you've covered all the possible sets of explanations? So it's really hard to know something. But people don't, I don't think they do that. They just think about something, come up with one explanation, and then they're like, yeah, I guess that's it. And it's just laziness. And I think it's lack of self awareness. I think a lot of people, they don't even, they don't know what they're doing is wrong. Um, Yeah, they just don't even know that they're being lazy. And if you kind of, if you, it's funny because it's like they say something with certainty, and it's like, well, did you ever consider this? And it's like they haven't even considered it. It's like, well, okay, seems like you skipped a couple steps. Um, but and then and then you find that like you, okay, like they present something with absolute certainty, and then you kind of prove them wrong, and then they move to something else, or maybe throughout their life they just realize they're wrong eventually, and then they change their mind. But it's like they don't they never kind of like take a step back, and it's like, okay, maybe I'm just too certain. I just shouldn't be. Seems like there's people who go through life and they just go from wrong opinion, wrong opinion to wrong opinion, and every step of the way they're absolutely certain, or they'll have one idea and they switch back and forth. And look, there's nothing wrong with changing your mind, but if you change your mind all the time, you should. If you need to change your mind, you should change your mind. But I think a properly calibrated brain would never change their mind because they would never set their mind on things that could end up being wrong. Like you only have to change your mind if you set it to begin with. And if you realize that you might be wrong, you shouldn't actually set it. You should be agnostic, or you should kind of see things as like a rather than beliefs, things that are true or not true. It's like a kind of just like a spectrum of possibilities, or a landscape of possibilities. And it's like, well, this is, and of course, the probability you set different possibilities like that you could be wrong about. It's like, well, this belief is fairly, I don't know it's true, but there's a high chance it's true. And this belief, there's in reality, those probabilities could be wrong. It's like something you think is almost certainly true could end up, well, okay, I don't even know if that makes sense. Anyways, but I have to think through that a little more. But anyways, um, what I do know is that certainty is not just, it's not like a button that you press to make yourself feel good. It's like it's not just something you play with to to kind of appease your ego. It's something that um, should be honest. Um, and there's just like this level, there's this massive level of dishonesty and kind of manipulation by just kind of presenting. I don't know. I mean that could be overstating it, but it kind of is. It is dishonest and it is misleading to just act as though you're certain about everything because people will hear you and they will place their confidence in you because they when other people look at somebody's certainty, they will interpret it as, oh, that means that like if you're 100% certain, that means that like you've done the work, you've done the legwork, you've done the research, you have the intelligence, you like that's how we interpret other people's certainty. Yet we don't. Most people don't employ it that way. Um, I just feel like the world would be such a better place if people, if everything else about the world was exactly the same, but people would just like their certainty was properly calibrated and they were more honest and like their outward certainty and kind of internal feeling of certainty was correlated properly with how certain they should be, and the world would be a much better place. But oh well.